Bienvenue à toutes et à tous. My name is Emmanuel, Kattan. I'm the director of the Alliance program here at Columbia University. My colleagues and I are thrilled to welcome you all to the Columbia Conference on Reimagining Teaching and Learning in the Age of AI. A year and a half ago, as artificial intelligence was taking higher education in the world by storm, Senior Vice Provost Suleiman Kachani told me we need to organize a conference on AI and higher education. I told him, yes, of course. When Suleiman, for those who know him, when Suleiman has an idea, it's impossible to say no. So then I thought, well, we can't possibly do this on our own. And I turned to colleagues at the Center for Teaching and Learning and the Data Science Institute, who gracefully took the reins, and it is thanks to them that we are all gathered here today. My gratitude goes to Garud Iyengar and his fabulous DSI team, especially Alexis Avedisian, and to Amanda Irvin and her colleagues in the CTL, including Susanna Klaff, to Lalitha Vasudevan at Teachers College, to my Alliance colleagues, Jessica Cochran and Georgia O'Neill, and of course to our Provost, Angela Olinto, and our Dean of Engineering, Shih-Fu Chang. Today, there are many reasons to be pessimistic. A few months ago, Dario Amodei, the CEO of Anthropic, predicted that AI would drive unemployment up 10 to 20% in the next 5 years and wipe out half of entry-level white-collar jobs. But there are also many reasons to be optimistic. AI, like every other industrial revolution in the past, will create new opportunities and jobs we haven't yet imagined. By introducing greater efficiency in company management, workflows, and output, AI will increase productivity and generate growth. Predicting the future is often a reckless venture, and sometimes in order to grasp what will happen in the future, it's useful to look back into the past and glance at how our predecessors themselves envisioned the future. In 2001, more than 25 years ago, UNESCO chief Federico Mayor wrote a book called The World Ahead, in which he attempted to forecast what would be the main challenges of the 21st century. In the era of higher education, he expressed a desire to embrace new tools of communication, many of which are now practically defunct. CD-ROMs and DVDs, ever heard of those? The priority at the time was to seize new communication opportunities to expand education and access to knowledge. But while this goal still remains relevant today, over 700 million people still cannot read and write, the challenge we're facing is not only opening the doors of knowledge, but ensuring that this knowledge will equip young people for success in an AI-driven world. While Federico Mayor hit the nail on the head on issues like lifelong learning, many of his predictions were off, simply because he could not have predicted the advent of social media and the dominant role that AI is likely to play in the future workplace. So we have to be modest and prudent when we try to gaze into the future. At the same time, we cannot but try to imagine the shape of things to come if we want students and graduates to be equipped with the skills and knowledge they need in order to thrive in this challenging new world. That is precisely what our speakers will attempt to do today. I hope you enjoy the proceedings and gain from the innovative and exciting new ideas they will share with you. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Lalitha Vasudevan. I am Vice Dean for Digital Innovation at Teachers College and the Managing Director of the Digital Futures Institute. And I join Emmanuel and my colleagues in thanking the Greater Columbia University community for your enthusiasm and support of today's events, and of course our colleagues at CTL, at DSI, and the Alliance program in particular. On behalf of my colleagues at Teachers College, we are officially a graduate school of education, health, and psychology. I'm delighted to see how our conversations and planning over the last several months with our colleagues here on main campus have culminated in what promises to be an inspiring and engaging day of discussions and insights into reimagining teaching and learning against a backdrop of rapidly evolving AI technologies. Beyond new technologies and new applications for teaching and learning specifically, all of us everywhere are seeing a proliferation of AI technologies into everyday spaces, particularly spaces where children are learning, exploring, and playing. In a recent study published by US PIRG, they found over 1 million toys. There's over 70 on the market now, but over 1 million of them with generative AI chat capabilities had been purchased. And these are 4- and 5-year-olds who are interacting with toys. And these are the same children who are going to enter school with a very different set of expectations for who their learning interlocutors could be and what learning interlocutors should be like. These same children, in about 12 years, are going to be undergraduates at universities like ours. What will their classrooms look like? Will we have classrooms? This is always a fun question to ask in this room like this. How are their repertoires of critical thinking and foundational building blocks of inquiry, experimentation, and yes, play, those practices that are primordial to children's development, being reformed even now as we are having this deliberative discussion? Today, in our classrooms across this university, students are experimenting with a wide range of tools and platforms, and some of them are also engaging in the building of new technologies. The reshaping of teaching and learning is happening, not just within our classroom context, but every day in dorm rooms, on the streets, in libraries. And they're not often happening generated through what's happening at the university. They're also happening in response to what we are engaging with from our industry partners. As an institution, as a university, we have the opportunity to move past the oscillating tensions of fear and exultation that frame so many debates around AI in teaching and learning. We can and we must pursue both immediate and short-term responses to the changing communication landscape while continuing to strengthen the groundwork and infrastructure here for thoughtful, studied research and application. So while the bottom line for higher education is different than the bottom line for technology companies, that difference should not preclude collaboration. In fact, collaboration across private and public partnerships, across private and industry partnerships is vital. The rapid deployment of new technologies and tools has made approaches to teaching and learning overwhelming in recent years, not only for university faculty, but also for so many of the K-12 educators that we interact with regularly. What we do as a university, as a broader academic community, can have global reach, not only to provide answers or impact in one direction, but to ensure that our scholarship and institutional pursuits are informed and thoughtfully shaped by the people whose practice we seek to support. Convenings like this one that we're having today provide the opportunity for the spark of urgency to remain lit, to ignite new courses of action, and to re-examine and reaffirm the commitments and principles that anchor our institution. So thank you so much for your attendance and engagement today, and I'll turn it over to Amanda.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Amanda Irvin. I am the Center for Teaching and Learning's Executive Director, and I am thrilled to join the chorus of voices welcoming you all here today to reimagine teaching and learning in the age of AI. As Emmanuel said, we are offering this in great partnership with many offices, including Columbia's Data Science Institute, the Columbia Alliance Program, Columbia Engineering, Teachers College. This is one of those events that takes a village, and it's nice to see that our village has come together to wrestle with these challenging issues. As Executive Director of the Center for Teaching and Learning, I see today not only as a showcase of pedagogical innovation with AI at Columbia, but also a vital moment of collective and institutional learning. We get to come together and learn with one another. We often talk about how much AI might be learning from us as users, but today we get to learn and adapt as a teaching community together in collaboration. Throughout today's conversations, technology will likely inform much of our how, but our why remains the same, firmly rooted in the classroom. Today, we aren't looking for a single roadmap of definitive answers. Instead, we are here to celebrate innovation already unfolding in our classrooms, examine how we build a responsible, ethical framework for AI tools, and ensure that as we weave AI into our intellectual life, we don't lose the human-to-human connection that is the bedrock of a Columbia education. From our student-led debates to our faculty panels and interactive demos, which you'll see in the rotunda later today, this space is designed for dialogue over monologue. I encourage you to lean into the potential discomfort you might be feeling, especially if we raise unanswered questions or questions that we are still working out together. That is the beauty of a research institution. We are here to solve problems and not avoid them. And leaning into that discomfort is where real growth happens. To officially begin today's program, it is my distinct honor to introduce someone who is a steadfast advocate for academic excellence and innovation across our campuses. Please join me in welcoming our provost, Dr. Angela Olinto.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and welcome everybody. This is so exciting to be here this morning. Thank you to the Center for Teaching and Learning, the Data Science Institute over there, and our partners across the whole institution for convening this very important forum. It's wonderful to see so many parts of Columbia community here today to talk about the challenges and opportunities in teaching and learning in the age of artificial intelligence. AI is not a technology looming in the horizon. It's already here. It's already shaping how students study, how faculty design courses. It has changed how research and knowledge creation happen across disciplines all throughout Columbia and the world. The questions before us is not whether AI will influence higher education, but the question is how universities learn and adapt as the influence of AI accelerates. Well, at Columbia, we approach AI through the lens of our academic mission. We see extraordinary opportunities for discovery, creativity, and expanded access to knowledge. We also recognize the need for careful thinking about ethical standards, integrity, good judgment, equity, and the nature of learning itself. Leadership in this environment requires more than adopting new tools. It requires evidence, reflection, and clarity about educational purpose. At Columbia, one of the great advantages we have is our ability to link multidimensional impact of AI from different disciplines. The Data Science Institute has a crucial role to play as it is designed to connect schools, convene researchers, and translate AI research into practical collaboration and innovation. The DSI operates with an explicit goal to break silos and connect disciplines through AI. Columbia's engineering school is central to our AI leadership with pioneering research in computer vision, large-scale multimedia analysis, and many other initiatives under the leadership of Dean Shih-Fu Chang. Also based in the engineering school is our newest contribution to the field, the Masters in AI. It is anchored in engineering, where students learn the fundamentals of AI, but it also designed to have cross-school models that plug into many applications across schools, for example, in public health, medicine, business, finance, architecture, and many, many more areas, growing by the minute. This program was just proposed recently and very quickly approved, and already had 1,000 applications within the first week of its announcement. We will begin with 100 students of those thousands of applications and scale as we move along. AI is becoming an engine of innovation across disciplines. At the Irvin Medical Center, AI is already advancing healthcare, supporting research, and improving diagnosis and helping shape new treatment approaches. At the Mailman School of Public Health, researchers apply machine learning to pressing challenges in biology and population health, including aging, stress biology, cognitive decline, and health disparities at scale. At the business school, we have expanded coursework and programming focused on data analytics and strategic implications of AI, integrating these themes in both the core curriculum and elective offerings. At the business school, there's an AI in business initiative that has focused on expanding education, innovation, and knowledge in the intersection of business and AI. Researchers at the Columbia Law School are exploring the AI effects on legal reasoning, regulatory design, governance, and examining the ethical challenges of automation. At the School of International and Public Affairs, students are using AI tools to examine algorithm fairness, regulatory design, the workforce impacts, and preparing to shape the future of AI in policy and governance. At the School of Social Work, AI supports social impact initiatives, including data-driven platforms aimed at reducing opioid overdoses deaths. Indeed, across Columbia, from music and the arts to the sciences, AI is now part of our intellectual life. Schools across the university are adapting their teaching and curriculum to meet this moment. Faculty in the humanities and social sciences are using AI not as a shortcut, but as a pedagogical tool. For example, in required writing seminars, instructors are experimenting with workflows where students use generative AI to support research synthesis and revision, but are then assessed on original interpretation and argumentation, ensuring that critical thinking remains central to their learning. These approaches are paired with curriculum modules that teaches students how to verify AI outputs and cite responsibly. In all this work, we are supported by the CUIT, which gives us the infrastructure that helps deploy the AI tools across the whole community, and working with the Center for Teaching and Learning, which is helping instructors learn and adapt their teaching practices for AI. This work is shaping practical guidance for instructors and how to design assignments, set expectations, and use AI to support deep inquiry and learning. Of the many reasons that Columbia will continue to lead in the space of AI, let me first mention where we are located in New York City, a city of a living laboratory across healthcare, finance, media, law, retail, insurance, and real estate, all industries that are being reshaped by generative AI. Columbia sits inside this vibrant ecosystem, which means we can help guide how AI gets deployed in complex, regulated, real-world settings. We have many advantages, of which is the city that I just mentioned, but also the breadth we have in the 17 schools with our brilliant faculty, staff, and students. Our strengths are not only building the best algorithms, but also combining engineering, statistics, medicine, climate science, law, journalism, philosophy, policy, and the humanities. That breadth allows Columbia not only to build AI systems, but to interrogate them through ethics, governance, and social impact. For businesses and governments deploying AI in complex regulated settings, interdisciplinary depth matters more than the access to new models. Indeed, we are preparing students for a world where technology keeps changing. So what do they need? What do our students need for the future? One important aspect that students need is adaptability. They also need judgment and critical thinking. These are all very important parts of our liberal education from the undergraduate and our professional education on the professional schools. The ability to evaluate systems is going to be more important than using them. AI can help learning, but it can also weaken it. So our job is to know the difference between preparing our students accordingly and make sure that we can dive and more deeply educate in this AI space. So, to start our panel discussion, I'm pleased to introduce the deans with the institutional vision for AI with many parts of our institution. To moderate the panel, Garud Iyengar, the Evanescent director of the Data Science Institute and professor at Columbia Engineering, please join us. And in the conversation, we will be pleased to have a really amazing set of deans, starting with Dean Shih-Fu Chang from Columbia Engineering, Dean Amy Hungerford from Arts and Science and EVP, Jelani Cobb, Dean of the Graduate School of Journalism, Katrina Armstrong, Dean and CEO of the Irvin Medical Center, Costis Maglaras from the Columbia Business School. So their perspectives will help illuminate our AI strategy, innovation, and education priorities, and how to take shape across the future of the institution. So thank you so much, fellow deans, to have this wonderful conversation with you.
Angela, for the introduction. Thank you all for joining. There is a QR code here for submitting questions. Please feel free to add the questions whenever you have a question in your mind so I can get to it at the end of the panel discussion. So I'm going to start with having the deans express basically what's happening in their individual schools. What is happening today? What's now possible that was not possible before? What has felt new? What has felt unfamiliar? And how are you thinking about it? So please keep these descriptions to about 2 minutes so that we can delve into the various perspectives that we're getting from all the schools. So I'm going to start with Katrina over there.
Okay, so, I wonder if I'm going to have a slightly unusual perspective on this. And so I'll share my perspective from medicine and health and biomedical research. My perspective is that for a long time, we've really struggled in medicine and in biomedical research to really emphasize what we see as the most important parts of medical training, which is the human side. That in fact, we've been caught up in this model where learning more gets you an A and being able to tell people the fact right when you're in the rounds gets you a better grade. And so for us, magically, AI is actually transforming us back to who we want to be. Where I think medicine is really about the ability to take data, to make it come information, but then to use that to create a bond with a patient and their family about how to understand the individual circumstance to move it forward. So for us, medicine, if we think about the clinical applications, and I'll say 2 other things quickly, is really driving forward, I think, a revolution in where we've wanted to go in medicine a long time, which is how do we go back from this overwhelming amount of information that comes out to doctors to really thinking about what is the doctor's job. And it can't be to be the encyclopedia that remembers all of that. It has to be to create a bond that patient and their family can go through a journey with their illness that gets them to a better place. For us, AI is also taking on some of the biggest challenges we have. So for any of you who've seen a doctor, you've watched them try to figure out how to talk to you and document in the computer at the same time. You've tried to figure out how are they managing that enormous amount of information that you know is somewhere in your chart, right? And you're worried, do they know about it? Should you tell them, right? I mean, we've all been through this. So AI, we're now using AI tools for most of our notes. So we get permission, but doctors can actually use those tools to document, giving them much more time to talk to the patient. I think we're taking on burnout in huge ways. And then I'll say the last thing I'll say, Garud, and I'd love to see what other people think about this, is I'm going to say that I see AI as a way to really ask ourselves, what are we doing in education? Was it ever working, honestly? And so we've created, if you're in biomedical research, we hold ourselves to incredibly high standards for outcomes. We ask ourselves every day, is treatment A better than treatment B? How do we bring biology? How do we bring evidence to decisions? I don't think we've done that in education. Maybe to some degree we're doing it more in my son teaches high school math. Maybe we're doing it more and more in some parts of education. But my dream of AI is that we actually are able to bring data together from educational systems that allow us to figure out what is working and democratize it. It is not right that everybody doesn't have access to the best doctors in the country. And so if I can figure out what is working, I can then make that possible for everyone to participate in an educational system that actually works.
I think I'm going to switch on this direction now to Costis.
Okay. So I'll tell you a little bit about our space. In short, AI for the last 3 to 5 years has been changing dramatically the educational process at the school, and that is, in some sense, equipping students with learning about what it is, then developing curriculum about how it's changing the different career options that they may actually pursue after they graduate, because we're a professional school and that's central to their thinking. And then the third layer is how AI as a capability is changing the whole process of education. How students prepare, how we teach, how sort of classroom conduct is actually conducted, how feedback is given back to the students. So we're developing tools and technologies to do all of that. I would say that it's a fascinating process. We're very early into that journey, and in some sense, it's an area where there is a lot of anxiety by the students. They're coming in, they're in the late 20s, they're anticipating that they're gonna work for 2, 3, 4 decades after that, and they know that irrespective of how fast AI is gonna start disrupting different industries, over the span of their own professional arc, it will be a big driver of change. So they're very curious when they come in, and in some sense, we're trying to sort of address that, but in some way try to do that in a way that is both rigorous in what happens in the class, but also, we're learning and adjust along the journey. So there's a lot of work happening in education. There is a lot of work happening in how AI is going to change our, what I would call, research process. And that, I think, is interesting and fairly dynamic. And I know it's not part of the panel, but it's something that over time we need to be addressing. What the business school also tries to do is tries to sort of talk to practitioners, talk to large institutions, to governments, to businesses, and actually try to see how AI is being deployed, how it could be deployed, and try to sort of influence, learn from that process, but also influence how that's going to play out. And the reason I'm saying that is, even though AI capabilities are improving dramatically fast, the ability of large institutions to digest them works in a different time scale. If any of you work in a large organization, I mean, we are a large organization here at Columbia, but I'm taking ourselves out, and you ask yourself, what's the time scale within which massive change can happen in a big corporation or in a government? Well, that works in a time scale that is like 5 to 10 year cycles. So you got to crank through a few of these 5 to 10 year cycles until you sort of reimagine a huge organization. And this is, of course, very different than the speed of AI. So there's going to be a lot of work in sort of navigating organizational change. And this is about people. It's not about technology. It's about motivating people, inspiring people, alleviating fears, deciding how you're going to sequence change, right? So that you don't do all of it, but you do it gradually so that it actually can get digested by the body, so to speak. And there's a lot of work that we're doing navigating that interface and hopefully influencing that interface. And the last thing that we're trying to do, we need to do more of that at Columbia, and we're uniquely positioned based on what Angela was telling us before, due to our breadth and due to our location, is think about the implications of AI in society. In some sense, we're ground zero by being New York, right? And I think we're uniquely positioned to be some of the sort of the leading institution in thinking about that. And we're trying to do our piece at the business school, but we need to bring everybody else in the fore, because that's going to be something that we will grapple over time, and we will see a lot of that in our beautiful city, and we're positioned well to help our country to think about that. So I'll stop at that.
Costis, Jelani?
So I think, part of what Katrina said and what Costis said resonated with me, and we're thinking at the journalism school about how we kind of both utilize AI pedagogically, but also navigate the ways in which it's being disruptive to the industry that the school is tied to. And so, it's a kind of both and scenario that we find ourselves in. And so the disruptive parts of it, not that hard to see, even on something as fundamental as search engines now prioritizing AI results, and they long ago de-emphasized news links, but now it's just a kind of magic product that you don't know that there's actually very often reporting that cost money that went into creating this result, and it's hidden behind the magic veil. So on that side, it has the deleterious impact on journalism, and probably 10 other ways that we could talk about if we had time. And at the same time, I think that out of respect, maybe people aren't as exuberant as they really want to be, but people are almost giddy at the ways in which you can use these tools for reporting. Unfortunately, we're in a moment where this is applicable again, but one of my faculty members, Azmat Khan, won a Pulitzer Prize for physically going to Iraq and Afghanistan and literally counting fatalities in US bombing missions, civilian fatalities, and finding, perhaps not surprisingly, that the numbers that she physically calculated were much higher than what the United States government had conceded. And she has been engaging with the ways in which AI models that can recognize bomb craters from satellite data would have given her an entirely different vantage point on what's going on. And complex financial investigations, even to the extent of the kind of day-to-day things that happen in a newsroom that you can expedite and then move over into other more useful expenditures of your time. So we're trying to utilize all of those things to familiarize our students with all of those things. And there's an applicability for everyone. We are an enormously varied bunch in terms of the way that we approach journalism, but there's applicability even, one example, I teach opinion writing, and as you might suspect, opinion writing is a kind of self-selecting group. It tends to attract fairly opinionated people. And I have encouraged them to, before filing a column, to have a language model write a counter argument. And so, is this column airtight? Are there counter arguments that I hadn't considered, and all those things? And so that part of it is really exciting, even as we're trying to deal with the disruptive elements that are implicit within it as well.
Jelani? Amy?
I'm struck by the sort of unified stories that I think some of the professional schools can tell. In arts and sciences, the range of our disciplinary coverage is enormous. Everything from French literature and philosophy and the arts, all the way to quantum science and chemistry and astronomy and economics and political science in between. So I would say, are in a moment of sort of efflorescence, that in all those different areas and domains of teaching and research, people are beginning to experiment. But what I would say also is that in our undergraduate education in particular, we have always prized, and our identity is really deeply tied to our core curriculum, which is a form of learning that takes place around a table, in person, in conversation, teaching students to think aloud together, to create, in a way, new knowledge in the air through their words and through the interaction of their thoughts. Those are essential skills that I think we are realizing in an AI age are highly valued both for a life of adaptability and by employers who now want to interview you rather than just looking at your CV or your writing or the product that they might be interested in. So we begin from that space, which is both extremely diverse intellectually and also unified around a commitment to this kind of learning. I think what we see in this moment in our students in particular is a kind of divided world. And there's a version of this that's true for the faculty as well. The divided world is that about half our students, and we know this because we've done some surveying with our first-year students, about half of them are excited to use AI and want to embrace it and see it as a way to really expand their learning. And about half of them are extremely worried that it will actually rob them of the learning they came here to achieve. And how do we navigate those 2 points of view? And I would say they also each have a little bit of the other. So those students who are very wary and worried, when they begin, our surveying has shown, when they begin to use AI tools in their learning, at the beginning, they're blown away. They think, this is amazing. This is going to change everything. When you talk to the people on the other side who have really begun to use those tools, the more they use them, the less they think they are doing for them. This is a very interesting learning environment. And I think our faculty are learning alongside our students and have similar ambivalence. And so that's an environmental fact for us. I want to say two more things. Students can now begin original research, which we always want them to have an experience of at a place like Columbia. They can begin original research at a point that, 10 years ago would have been reserved for a postdoc. And we've heard people say in our Department of Earth and Environmental Science, for example, using GIS data and artificial intelligence together, they can really begin as a senior in college to do extraordinary work and arrive at new knowledge production that we've never been able to expect of a young researcher at that time. At the same time, I think the question of originality is really at the heart of their effort to become independent thinkers, and there are lots of questions that they bring to that moment of research. And I think this is particularly keen in areas in the humanities. I always have known that my students are worried that their argument is not original. If you're writing your dissertation or your senior essay on a play by Shakespeare, there are thousands of people who have thought about that play over the many, many centuries. And I always reassure them that that particular alchemy of their mind, their experience, their learning, and the archive they carry around and that they construct in the library or in archives, that they should trust, at least at the front end, that originality lives in that human space. And I think that is still true, that originality still lives in that human space. Predictive models can predict only based on what has happened in the past. Human beings, with the alchemy of individuality and the mystery of our minds, human beings are still the fount of originality. Figuring out how to navigate all of that is another matter, but I have really firm confidence in that piece, and we have to keep that alive for our students.
Thank you. And our Shih-Fu?
Yeah, I'm just enjoying listening to my peer dean's wonderful comments here. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you for organizing this. So about 3.5 years ago, this OpenAI, ChatGPT come up, changed so fast, right? And by the way, my colleague, the chair of the CS department, Luca Carloni, is also co-leading the AI effort in engineering school. So tremendously changed how we learn, how we teach, and how we conduct our innovation. engineers strive to solve problems, to contribute to humanity, to have a positive impact. And that's our vision. That's our mission, engineering for humanity. And we are so lucky to be in a really comprehensive, broad depth and intellectual really expertise at Columbia. So really changed two things. One, engineers create computer, internet, image, and MRI machine in the past few decades. Now the AI come out, moves so fast. So there's a lot of excitement here. We hired 10 faculty members in the school about AI last year, just 1 year. Okay, just right, continue to drive the frontier. So there's a lot of excitement. But with all this excitement and wonderful advancement, also feel tremendous responsibility, right? And with this vision of engineering for humanity, we want to contribute to the society good and humanity in a positive way. How do we explain the output is aligned with the human value, right? Guardrail development. How do you check security? No backdoor attack. Jailbreaking, that the output is still aligned with our human value. So they require a lot of training, collaboration, cross-disciplinary conversation, and education here. So in the program we developed in the CS department, AI courses always focus from a very top-tier criteria for students to understand ethical impact, society impact of AI technology we developed. I remember when I submit with my PhD student to a conference paper on AI, 10-page paper, the last half page, we have to discuss what is the unanticipated consequence of the technology you developed in this paper. And at the beginning, actually, my student myself has a hard time trying to understand how to write that. But now it's become a norm for engineers, scientists to think about that. So how do we do that? So we, in the classroom, when we teach programming, not only about what's the best way to write a code, also we want students to collaborate with AI to check security, to check the possible consequence, not only in terms of system security, but also in terms of output is that aligned with not only regulation compliance, but also human value. In the MSAI program that Angela mentioned, we also focus very much on ethical AI, and that has contribution not only from engineering school, also from multiple schools in that course. And the last aspect I want to mention here is we also are so fortunate to take advantage of the broad expertise on the campus. One of our colleagues, Lydia Chilton, in CS department, is teaching a very popular course and also collaborate with Matt Connolly in history in 2 courses. One is AI storytelling in collaboration with, I think, Lance Weiler in arts school. Very popular, right? Try to understand not only to use AI generate new 3D video, which is very beautiful or is really impressive, is how do you express the argument, the creativity, and story that you want to tell. So the trained engineer student not only look at the pixel, not only look at the soundbite, look at the story behind in collaboration with artists. And also in collaboration with Matt Connolly, understand how the studio tool in generating possible hypotheses that Amy mentioned, that could be a different space for exploring different argument, different framing, and different perspective. Not to lose the originality in human, right? Let me stop here.
Thank you, Shih-Fu. Thank you all. So, as we heard all of the various deans talk about AI in their schools, very different perspectives come up. The medical school is thinking about going back to what a physician should be doing. Business school is thinking about how the MBAs are going to be navigating the workspace. Jelani was thinking about originality, and so was Amy. I want to, in some ways, these are very different perspectives potentially on how this technology is changing and how the schools are adapting to it. The place that I want to understand is whether it makes sense to approach AI through the disciplines, or does it make sense to think about a shared framework across Columbia University? There are advantages and disadvantages to both of these approaches, and I want to explore a little bit more about what breaks if we leave AI entirely to the individual schools, and what is missing if we centralize it or bring some kind of a structure in it. And I'm going to go to Shih-Fu for this, because in terms of the MS in AI, there is this tension that is being explored in a way that takes advantages of the domains, takes advantages of giving people a technical depth. And I want to see if you could speak a little bit more about how you're managing that.
It's not tension at all. It's a huge opportunity for us right here. Really, how do we approach this? And maybe repeating what I said earlier, is really cross-disciplinary expertise and breadth at Columbia is a huge opportunity here. And so instead of the friction, or we have to choose between top-down or discipline-specific, I do think this cross-disciplinary opportunity for engaging AI or using AI is our huge opportunity. So Lydia's course with Lance Wilder's course in arts school, that's a beautiful example. Another example is the course that Adam Kattan in CS, together with 5 faculty members in engineering, in humanity, in arts, jointly teach a course called AI in Context. I'm not sure any student here have taken that course. Has been over 2 years. I think this is the 2nd year. Every year they have about 100 or 150 students, first-year undergraduate student, who want to learn more about AI, starting 2 years ago. And not only engineering students, students from college, students from honors, students from general study. And the way we approach this introduction course, I'm very proud of this, is 12 weeks. Beginning, you talk about history of data and what is it, how is data curated, used in the society application. And you talk about computing, right? How do you solve a problem in computational thinking algorithm? How do you solve the problem in organized data, making the prediction? And then we go to specific domain, literature, history, music, and very importantly, philosophy, to talk about ethical aspect. So 5 faculty members working together come up with a comprehensive multidisciplinary approach to introduce AI to the first-year student across colleges here. I think that's a huge opportunity we should explore.
Shih-Fu. And absolutely, please.
One of the benefits of being in the medical school is that I get to, spend a lot of time with people who are in the college or who are in engineering. And I think sometimes when we're thinking about education, I think we forget that the students are on the journey with us, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And so we may say we're the college and then we're the medical school, but honestly, it's all the same kids who are figuring out what they're going to be and what they're going to do. And so in that model, I would strongly encourage us to have a thoughtful, integrative approach to how we approach AI, not just at Columbia, but maybe in, more broadly across education, understanding what are the different milestones, pathways people can take. Because for somebody in the medical school, knowing what happened in the college, knowing that approach will be infinitely helpful for us as we help those students get to their next stage. So I think we have to come together. I honestly don't think it will work for the students. And in the end, that's our responsibility, is the students.
And it connects up with your original comment about probably this is the time we have to re-examine education in a much more deeper way. Amy?
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in and add another element to that, which is one cross-cutting essential, I think, technique is that we have to partner as teachers with students. We cannot do this top-down in the classroom. And I think that's one of the sort of very striking features of this technology. Sure, you could cheat in the past. You could go and buy papers on plagiarism sites, but this is a whole different level of engagement, and the university has not told students that they cannot use these tools. But they, as I mentioned, have this ambivalence. And I think the partnership is really joining with students to understand education not as as little factories in each class where you produce product, but rather a process that changes the mind and produces cognitive gain. Students want that just like teachers want that. And if we can really get out of this enforcement dynamic, or a dynamic that is very sort of certain about its approach, students do want the same thing as teachers, and that partnership has to happen in all these contexts.
Any comment, Costis or Jelani?
I'll go back to your original question about, I actually think that we're so early on into that journey. And for me, the comment that I make often to people that I talk to is all of us in the room learned in much the same way that we were learning hundreds of years ago, right? We were assigned 2 chapters of a book. We were asked to write a summary, more chapters, more summaries, problem sets, and that process hasn't changed. And, that's sort of how we train the mind. And now we're in a period where that process may be disrupted, and we really need to think very thoughtfully to make sure that we don't actually shortchange the outcome that the students will actually take. We're solving for the easiest problem right now, because the students that are coming into our class, or all of us when we're using AI, were what I would call fully baked products, right? We were educated in a different process, and now we're adopting a new type of technology. But 20 years from now, the kids that will come to the college haven't been born yet, right? They will be born right now. They'll go to kindergarten in about 6 years. At that point in time, AI models will be about 1 million times more powerful, at least. They'll be everywhere, right? And the question is, how is their brains going to get wired over that K-12 journey before they actually show up? So we are solving for a simple problem right now, and I think many of us in the room are trying to innovate in the corners of our educational journey. I do think there is tremendous value if we could actually, it's not like we're trying to do the same thing in our classrooms, but we're trying to achieve similar outcomes. So I think bringing people together at the university level for sharing, the number of people that are experimenting with this is significant, but it's still a minority within the faculty and the classrooms. In some sense, at the business school, maybe we're a little bit further ahead, but we're still not even covering 50% of our courses, right? We're covering a quarter, 25% of our courses are dramatically redesigned in the last 3 years. So, and that's because 10 faculty members raised their hands, right? So in some sense, we need to be learning from that. We need to be sharing both tools, approaches. I was in a conversation 2 days ago where meeting with some other deans from other business schools, and in one of them, they said, well, now that students prepare with these tools, when they come in and you cold call a student at the beginning of class, the first interaction where you have with the student lasts 15 minutes, okay? You don't ask one question. You have an exchange that lasts 15 minutes. That's an enormously insightful exchange. You go 10 questions deep, right? So it changes. So we have to be learning about how we navigate that, because to be honest, none of us actually are prepared for what's coming. We talk about AI disrupting industries, and it's going to disrupt industries. One of the industries it's disrupting is ours, okay? Probably faster than others. So in some way, we need to bring people together across units. We're not all solving for the same problem, but we all have the same goal, and we're all trying to learn right now. And these learnings and these lessons, these tools, needs to actually be shared in a sort of rapid way. Maybe Garud, you can help with that.
Maybe, Costis, I'm going to come back to you in a moment. Shih-Fu mentioned cross-disciplinary courses across engineering, across various humanities. Costis also mentioned courses that are being changed 10 10 faculty members stood up and said, I want to change my course, I want to use AI differently. Katrina was at the very other end of the spectrum, almost thinking about, I would say, lifelong learning, like starting from maybe high school to college to by the time they end up in medical school, how are we coordinated in how we do things? And maybe one unit above from courses is curriculum development. How are we thinking about changing curricula rapidly as this technology is coming? Costis alluded to the fact that the way we learn has probably not changed, but since the printing press was invented and maybe books were generally available. How are people thinking about changing not just the curriculum in AI, but the curriculum across the schools? Does somebody want to take it up? Amy?
I mentioned partnership between students and teachers, and one element of that in thinking about curriculum is deciding which parts of the curriculum everyone will agree are AI-free zones. And maybe that's our core curriculum, maybe that's that seminar table where the live thinking together happens. In arts and sciences, we are in a deep conversation. I see Dan Rabinowitz here, thinking with us in statistics about an AI minor. We sat down around a table with about, 5 different disciplines from humanities, social sciences, a couple of days ago to think about what would arts and sciences version of an AI minor look like. And it quickly emerged that there was a thing called learning how AI works, and it's quite technical and mathematical. Then there's a thing about the implications of AI, and maybe that's philosophy and ethics and sociology. And then there's learning about AI. What are the effects, historical, political, and so on, that we can see and observe going on in society because of this new technology? So I think curriculum has to be in all those spaces. Sorting out how to create coherent programs for our students. We didn't get to the end of that conversation the other day. It really felt like the start with several hard nuts to crack, thinking about different kinds of students with different kinds of aims. But I think having all those three in play in the curriculum is absolutely critical.
Yeah, you mentioned different kinds of students with different kinds of aims. Potentially, this technology allows us to meet them where they are in different ways.
Well, that's more, this dream of the bespoke tutor. That's what I hear in your comment, is the idea of individualized learning that really begins where students are, has ways of understanding where that machine thinks they are, and then brings them to develop the particular skills that they need. And I do think that's very, very interesting. And some of our courses have already deployed that. I think some of the AI context and computing context are using individualized tutors, but I know our economics department is using that technology as well.
At the core of what we do is, reporting and often writing. And we have a kind of model of, to Costis's point, of how reporting gets done. And we've all seen movies. We all know about the person going around with the notebook and saying, can you say this again for me, and what happened, and so on. But we're looking now. I was at a conference 2 weeks ago with a group of journalism deans, and we were all talking about the ways in which we're thinking of integrating AI into the fundamental reporting process and teaching reporting. Because the standard assignment for a reporter, especially an early reporter, is to go to the school board meeting. And the school board meeting might be interminable. And 3 hours of the 3 hours that you were there are 15 minutes of discussion that might actually generate a story. Whereas now, people are using AI and getting summaries of entire meetings and viewing those summaries across summaries of other meetings. So the part about the contentious fight over whether or not they will paint yellow or white lines in the parking lot, you can skip that. The part about what they're allocating or what the policy toward trans kids is going to be, that actually is the thing that you get to. And so the process of gathering information looks different now. The other part of it is writing. Those are our two core courses. And that has just been completely upended. Even in the profession now, increasingly, a first cut, nothing goes straight from AI out to the public, but often people are deploying AI for a first cut at an edit, which an editor will then look. So AI is a kind of intermediate step. And so that's increasingly, is that the way that we want to approach writing? We haven't kind of come to a conclusion about that. But I suspect that we will have some sort of relationship like that in the future. And then all of the other kind of specific things and all the our doc concentration and our data concentration and all these other ways in which there are myriad ways that AI will change the way our curriculum exists. And so we're really now kind of grappling with those questions in real time.
Costis, since you were ahead in the game in some ways in the business school about curriculum, any ideas about how are you designing for adaptability?
I mean, listen, we're learning in that journey, but we're certainly we're trying to make sure that the students are engaged in a way that sort of the pedagogy continues and the flywheel continues to be in place. What it ends up meaning is you end up being able to do more. You end up, you can go further in the 90-minute session. You can actually expect more from the students. But, at least for now, we're treating this as an enabler and as an opportunity. But simultaneously, I think, there's always I need to think of it as a positive, and I'm innovative and I'm trying to do my best. And I always have in mind what are the risks. I'm going back to what Shih-Fu was saying, that you write a paper and then at the very end you have to actually say, this could be unanticipated uses of that technology. So in some ways, we need to always be cognizant of, are we in some way compromising either the educational process? Is that a risk for the research process that our social scientists will engage in? And at some level, is there a downstream risk of what's going to happen to the whole financial model, let's say, of higher education? But that's a completely different story. What?
It may come up. There's a student debate in the evening today that may come up.
I'm not going to be here. But I actually view this period as a period where we, as an institution, we need to sort of be supporting innovation from our faculty and learning, right? And we need to sort of be critical in what's happening, but we need to sort of be embracing what's going on simply because our students are embracing. I don't think our students are sort of resisting these tools. But going back to Amy's comment, the students understand that if you just over-rely on these tools, maybe you're compromising the learning. So in some sense, that doesn't mean that they're not using the tools. It just means that we need to sort of learn how to play in that game. So I think my approach is I try to promote and support and incentivize all sorts of innovation in my school. I'm bribing people, incentivizing people, begging people, doing whatever I can, okay? Some of the people are in audience. And then try to sort of share what we're learning. And go back. Sometimes we do things and they don't work, and that's that journey. Technology is useful, we have found. We have built like a tool that sort of helps students prepare. Some of you have seen that tool, Casey, that Dan Wang has built, one of our colleagues, college alum, by the way, that allows for sort of it's a conversational AI that helps students prepare for class discussions. And one unintended consequence is that, foreign students that have different command of language, or, somehow they feel completely open to talk to that AI, and other, whereas in the classroom they were not want to talk for 20 minutes in front of 70 people. So it is actually, there are things that are coming out of that journey that are positive, and hopefully we're going to keep sharing as we're navigating that journey. Our learning, to be honest, going back to Katrina's original comment, education shifted, or certainly in the professional schools, it was very much skill-based. Okay, we were measuring skills. And actually, these capabilities will remove the premium from skills, and it will be, again, much more about synthesis, about people being able to sort of, and that, then that's the lens that we're getting at. Clearly, it's complicated. We don't know where we're going to be in 3 years, and we don't know where we're going to be in 10 years. We just need to be committed to learning and pivoting, and of course, for those of us that are professors, we know we don't like to pivot too much in our teaching. So, as a result, for those of us that are on the administration of our institutions, we need to be incentivized that pivoting, because otherwise we'll get stuck in local equilibria. So that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I think the skill versus thinking, that debate has become much more relevant now. I want to talk a little bit about integrity, because in the context of AI, this topic has come up multiple times. It probably was always, not probably, it was always a part of education, but the ease with which people can be tempted has gone up, and as a result, this issue has become very central, urgent in some ways. But it appears to me that AI or integrity discussions often focus around policy. We may be mistaking rule setting for value setting. It has historically meant something deeper: intellectual honesty, accountability for one's reasoning, maybe ownership of judgment. In an environment where AI can assist and maybe even replace portions of the cognitive process, what does integrity mean? How are we going to be thinking about it in this context? Does anybody want to take it?
I'll say a couple of things here, because I think you're so insightful about this. So one of my favorite subjects is studying the relationship, and actually most of this data comes from economics, Costis, it comes from your world, the relationship between regulation and trust. I don't know how many of you know those data, but essentially they show that the more you regulate, lower trust goes. Now you can imagine why, right? It's because you assume that if you have to have a regulation to tell everybody not to steal the coffee or something, that means everybody believes that everybody else is stealing the coffee. So there's lots of potential explanations for it. So I think we're at this time, and I think Amy articulated incredibly well, where we have to create a shared set of values of what we're trying to accomplish in education. And that may be different a bit in the medical school than it is going to be in the college, but together we have to articulate that. If we start putting students in the place where they're lying to us about not following a policy, we're in a very spiral to creating an extraordinarily low trust environment that will not get us where we want to go in education.
Yeah, the skill thing will also change a little bit. Anybody else wants to take a?
Yeah.
Yes.
No, integrity usually talk about the student really make the effort to submit the report, is that done by them. But I think the other aspect is what is the intellectual asset and value we are hoping aspiring student to really achieve, right? So in the age of AI, use it as a partner, as a learning companion. At the end of the day, the most important asset for each learner or designer developer is your critical design and thinking skill. right? So when we design the curriculum or classroom interaction, how do we assess students' critical thinking, judgment, independent judgment skill, right? Maybe in the past, we based on essay, one single report. Now we have to have a different methodology of assessing that, right? And how do you achieve the independent critical judgment skill? When we talked about earlier, a question about curriculum, I think foundation is very important. For humanity, foundation is in the classroom, your original thought process. For engineering, foundation is how you approach the problem. Is mathematics, it's biology, it's physics, it's probability, linear algebra, statistics. And also very importantly, how do you take a complex engineering problem to come up with a formulation that you can solve it in a systematic way. And that system design, human-centric approach is our foundation. So I think maybe we can flip the question instead of are we cheating our student presenting the authentic work? We should think about what is the value, what is the component or asset that we want to value most. If that's the core of the asset we want to value, then we should try to assess whether learner or instructor achieve that goal or not. The way we do the test, the way we do the evaluation, the way we assess our success in teaching not only student but also instructor should be different.
I want to keep some time for questions, and maybe some of the topics that I wanted to cover will come up in the questions. But before we go to questions, I want to just give everybody maybe 30 seconds to answer a question. What is one principle about AI in education that you believe Columbia must get right? And I'm going to start from this direction. Costis. 30 seconds, quick thing, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, so, in a world where, these tools provide incredible support for students and faculty, the most important thing for me is that we don't lose sort of the actual thing that we're trying to achieve. We want, at the end of this journey, for our students to have really support them in the journey so that they develop these cognitive skills that they will be capable of sort of leveraging in their life journey. So in some sense, the more you rely on AI, potentially, the less you develop these skills. So we need to figure out how to navigate that so that we actually don't lose the core tenet of what we're trying to achieve. I think that, to me, is the biggest risk. I think we're doing a good job. But I think that's the thing that we need to keep reminding ourselves, that we don't want people that eventually will become sort of passive users of AI without actually real knowledge of what's going on. And because that's neither transferable nor usable 3 years from now or 10 years from now. And so how do we leverage AI? Understanding that also everybody's using it, but in some sense don't lose the core thing that we're trying to achieve in the educational process.
It's interesting. I think, Costis, I was trying to formulate a different answer as you were talking, because that was the initial thing that I thought about as well. I'm just going to say that I think there's this concern that AI can take the place of the thing that we do, which is, I think, not really a concern for people who are knowledgeable about the thing that we do. But unfortunately, as we have seen many times in recent years, there's a lot of the world that doesn't understand what higher education does. And so spending 4 hours with really intricate and interesting prompts is not the same thing as spending 4 hours in dialogue and engagement with a faculty member and your peers and your colleagues. I think it goes back to that point about, where does the original thinking come from and what AI can tell us about what people have thought, previously. For us in journalism, this is particularly important because we have to produce news, which, the core word is new. You have to go out and find out things that we didn't know before. And we have to, I think, maintain that at the core of of what we do as an educational institution, both offensively in order to say we're moving forward, with gaining knowledge and so on, and also defensively because to the extent that people don't understand what we do, we find ourselves being very vulnerable.
I think my core value is that teaching and learning is an essential and equal partnership between teacher and student. I think if we keep that really in focus and at the center, we will be in a good place to ensure that cognitive gain is what our students can expect and what we deliver to them.
Shih-Fu?
A short one, maybe cheesy, engineering for humanity is always our first principle. And human-centric approach, not only to develop a responsible ethical AI for the good of humanity, every layer of a design AI, can you minimize energy consumption? Can you make sure it's understandable? Can you make sure align with human value? Can you think about the technology uses enhance our critical thinking skill of a human? So I think human-centric approach is really our first principle.
So I think my first principle would be that we need to be inclusive. We need to understand how we go from thinking about kind of looking inward at ourselves to understanding that we have a responsibility for society and that we're educating students because we believe they're going to make the world better, and that we need to be thinking about whatever we do, not as being about us, but being about something that we can share, and that it will actually elevate those who don't have access to most of what we do here. That would be my first principle.
Thanks, Katrina. And now I'm going to pick some questions that came out from the audience. So one of the questions was, what do universities like Columbia have in setting norms for how the society operates, the ethical and AI norms for, how do we keep that in mind while we are teaching our students and how they operate in the world outside of the university? Or do we engage to set norms outside of the university? Anybody want to take it? Jelani?
Can I go back? I mean, this is a far kind of leap of this, right? But bear with me for a second. My children, my 6-year-old twin sons have discovered Michael Jordan. And they're really very impressed with this guy. And so
AI or the basketball?
The actual one. We got them a poster, and it's just gone from there. But it reminded me of this thing that Michael Jordan talked about with the arc of his career. Where early in his career, he was just interested in what he could do. He was like, watch this. I can leap from here to there and dunk. I can do, Bulls weren't winning, but he was like, look at all the amazing things that I can do. And he said it took him maturing as a player and as an athlete to understand that the best talent he had was his ability to enhance his teammates' talents. And then they started a dynasty. They started winning everything they could. I think there's an AI analogy here because we're thinking about what we can do. And like, did you know we can do this, and we can do that, and we can deploy this way, and so on and so forth. But the philosophical part of it is what I think our strength is. And like these questions of engagement and what kind of society do we want? First off, aspirationally, what kind of society do we want? In what ways can AI help us achieve that society? What ways might AI be a retardant to achieving that kind of society? What are the ways that AI can enhance our abilities to do the things that we want to do well so that we actually win, as opposed to just having a collection of things that belong on a highlight reel, the metaphorical version of all kinds of technological applications, but we don't actually contribute to the bigger objective of what we're trying to get to.
Can I jump in? I'll start with a joke. There is a machine learning expert at Berkeley. His name is Michael Jordan. Who is one of the titans of the field, absolutely, and he was being referred as the Michael Jordan of machine learning. So I actually think that I'll make two comments. The first thing is, it's important for us to understand that since 1956, that the term AI was coined in a conference at Dartmouth, pretty much every development in that field until about 2013 was done in an academic institution. So we have actually developed that field from start till about when it was about 60 years old. The last 13 years, an enormous amount of work has happened actually in corporate labs. And the field is advancing a lot faster in these sort of frontier labs rather than potentially in academia right now. And there is a lot of work that is happening, and right now there is a lot of discussions that need to happen with the government about policy, et cetera. We are uniquely positioned, academic institutions, because we're experts in that area, to be a trusted voice to actually help navigate these conversations. These conversations, I don't think, can be left to government officials that actually don't know the field, nor to corporations that rightfully, even if they're well-intended, they have different objective functions. So I think there is a real role for academic institutions to play in that area, and we need to sort of engage in that. Columbia, when we're thinking about society, going to your question, I actually think that we are, again, uniquely positioned to be on the sort of tip of the spear in thinking about these questions. That has to do with our breadth in what we bring to the fore, both sort of expertise in the foundations of AI, understanding of what the models are doing and how they're built in the basic sciences, but also in the humanities and the social sciences, and law and business and everything else. And then is the fact that we're located in New York City, in this urban environment. This is not Boston, and it's certainly not the Bay Area. We're, sort of miles ahead of all of these institutions to actually lead in how we're thinking about how AI is going to be integrated within society, how it's going to disrupt society, how can we influence that journey. So I think that's an area that we are compelled to be at the forefront. And to be honest, we need to invest in that space because we have to actually help in that journey. Right now, our academic voices are not sort of helping navigate that journey. I'm not talking about Columbia alone, I'm talking in general. And we need to sort of engage in that area because we can add value, both in what's happening in Washington and elsewhere, but also in what's going to happen within sort of this interface of how AI is going to affect society.
There was a question that I am not going to take up. It says, if students use AI to complete assignments and exams, what is the value of a university degree? There is a debate that's happening this afternoon, which addresses exactly this question. So I encourage you to come and take part in that debate. Matt Connolly is, I think, leading one of them, but please come there. The other question that I do want to address in the last 5 minutes that we have is, what is intelligence, human intelligence, not the artificial variety, in the age of AI? What does it mean to say a person is intelligent? Costis had alluded to skills. There was a way that we evaluated students by saying, have you mastered a certain set of skills? But skills could now be outsourced to some extent. So what is intelligence? Shih-Fu had brought up the issue of assessment. So maybe I'll toss the question to him to start it off.
Yeah, and nowadays it's a really highly debated term. What is intelligence? There's AGI, or artificial generalized intelligence, and even researcher Luca can correct me. There's no single definition. There's no agreement there. But more important, as you are posing the question, what is the intellectual capacity? I was mentioning the asset we really want to preserve. We aspire to achieve, even in partnership with AI, right? Not to say who replace who. We, in the new world, the AI is our partner, is our companion, is really helping us to solve challenges here. Still going back to human-centric critical independent thinking, right? Are we solving the right problem? Is the output aligned with the human value? And when you have a complex challenge, no matter you work with consulting company or solving the complex problem here, what is your design goal and value you want to achieve? And how do you decompose a complex problem into a workflow? Maybe it's a medical procedure, maybe it's a financial transaction, maybe engineering infrastructure, so that the workflow is logical, is accountable, so we can verify, not just blindly trust AI to do that for us. For example, we have 5 faculty members in computer science right now, thinking very hardly, how is computer programming coding going to evolve in the future? Right now, you have cloud, you have all the tool, can do auto coding, or at least maybe very fast coding for us. So what is the value of a human skill, even in the coding aspect, right? So we have our wonderful star faculty thinking about this problem. If that is a partnership between machine and human, what is human contribution in that coding process, right? Is all of the coding 100% going to be replaced? No, definitely not. So how do you take a complex problem, decompose into a workflow that's logical, accountable, verifiable? And then at the end, you also think about is the output, the job performed by every aspect of the code aligned with a human value in terms of morality, in terms of fairness, in terms of privacy preserving, in terms of bias, also in terms of security. So those are the human aspects need to preserve.
I'll jump in. So, I think it's a phenomenal question, and, it's fascinating to me whether we're going to continue to use those terms, actually, as I'm sitting here thinking about it. And I'll just say that in medicine over the last 40 years, we've gone from what we used to call something called eminence-based medicine, which was basically that the people who talked the loudest, looked the smartest, got to decide what to do with a patient. Often I think that was correlated with the perception that they were the most intelligent. Often they were certainly the most certain. And people have actually done studies to show, particularly in some fields, that the more certain they were, the more likely they were to be wrong when we actually got the data about the patient. And so in medicine, we really tried to move over these years to the idea that the human part of this is exactly what you're saying, which is that we're synthesizing the evidence. And we're bringing that together, I think, Amy, as you talk with a student, for us with a patient as well as with students, and that it is that synthetic ability and that grounding in humanity and values that is actually what we do as humans or as doctors. And that, paradoxically, the more we focused on intelligence, the more mistakes we made. And so I wonder if this is a way for humanity, in some ways, to regain some humility about intelligence and come back to who we really are.
Can I add one thing? It's interesting, I'm not the doctor, but I'm going to say the body matters. Yeah. And feelings matter. And these are things that, some of the robotics are beginning to verge on having bodies, but we've always known that our brains as machines are far more sophisticated. We do not understand them. And intelligence, that disembodied sense of mastery, is not what human experience is. In fact, there's a great philosopher, I love Derek Parfit, who says, he writes about identity, and he says, what I am is simply my brain and body, my memories, the doing of my deeds, and the thinking of my thoughts.
We're also a lot more power efficient. So
true. So much more sustainable.
He's an engineer by training also, right?
But I would say something, I don't actually think that the questioning or talking about intelligence, as Katrina was saying, is sort of should be what we're engaging in right now. But if we think about intelligence, about how fields evolve and how our understanding evolves, that has to do about asking questions, formulating questions. And I think, that's really continues to be the frontier where we excel in some way. And we excel also in how power efficient we are. All right.
So on that note.